Dr. Vexhai had seen worse planets. The third rock orbiting this unremarkable yellow star looked positively habitable compared to the sulfur pits of Kepler, 442b, or the methane swamps of Proxima Centauri C. Blue oceans, green land masses, white clouds swirling in predictable atmospheric patterns. Textbook Goldilocks zone material. The kind of world that usually houses simple carbon-based life, forms with delusions of grandeur. Preliminary scans indicate complex civilization, announced technician Zilfak from their workstation, mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. Standard technological progression, radio waves, nuclear signatures, orbital debris. Nothing we haven't cataloged 1,000 times before. Research Director Mordun barely glanced up from the holographic displays surrounding her elongated frame. Estimated intelligence level? Mid-tier sapients. They call themselves humans, apparently. Still burning fossil fuels, still fighting territorial wars, still haven't figured out faster-than-light travel. Zilfak's secondary arms gestured dismissively, the usual pre-contact nonsense. What the hegemony's finest xenobiological research team hadn't expected to find in their routine planetary assessment was humanity's most comprehensive digital monument to failure, the Global Extinction Archive. Dr. Vexhai discovered it purely by accident, while scanning for biological diversity markers, standard procedure for determining a species' environmental stewardship capabilities. His deep-range sensors picked up an unusual data signature, not unusual in its complexity, but in its sheer, staggering size. "Director Mordun," he called, confusion evident in his synthesized voice. "I'm detecting a massive database. Cross-referenced, meticulously organized, constantly updated. It appears to be comprehensive documentation of every species these humans have eliminated." The research bay fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. Every species they would now. Mordun's crest flattened against her skull, a sure sign she thought she'd misheard. Eliminated, destroyed, rendered extinct. Vexhai's tentacles danced across his interface with increasing agitation. The database contains detailed records of 1,047,291 confirmed species extinctions directly attributable to human activity. Zilfak's mandibles stopped clicking entirely. That's more species than exist on most planets. It gets worse, Vexhai continued, his voice dropping to what would have been a whisper if a species possessed vocal cords. They didn't just document the extinctions. They documented the methods. Overhunting, habitat destruction, pollution, disease introduction, climate manipulation. It's all here, with dates, locations, causal analysis, and projected timelines. Research specialist Quinera, who had remained silent throughout the briefing, finally spoke. Her voice carried the tremor of someone realizing they'd stumbled into something far darker than expected. "Are you suggesting these humans created a comprehensive manual of extinction techniques?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Vexhai replied. "I'm reading directly from their files. They call it conservation science. But half the entries read like tactical reports." Mordun approached Vexhai's workstation, her movements careful and deliberate. As research director, she'd overseen first contact assessments for 47 different civilizations. She'd seen species that worship technology, species that had transcended physical form, even species that had achieved perfect ecological harmony. She had never encountered a species that had systematically cataloged its own capacity for annihilation. "Show me," she commanded. The holographic display materialized between them, and suddenly the research bay was filled with the ghosts of dead worlds. Entry after entry scrolled past. Passenger pigeon. Extinct 1914 caused commercial hunting and habitat destruction. Tasmanian tiger. Extinct 1936 caused systematic persecution and habitat loss. West African black rhinoceros. Extinct 2011 caused poaching for horn trade. By the void, whispered Quinera. They documented everything. But it wasn't just the numbers that unsettled the research team. It was the clinical precision. Each entry contained taxonomic classification, population decline graphs, exact extinction dates, contributing factors ranked by significance, and, most disturbing of all, detailed analysis of how the extinction could have been prevented. Look at this entry, Zilthak said, highlighting a section that made their skin crawl. Dodo bird, extinct 1681. They didn't just note that they hunted it to extinction. They documented the exact hunting methods that proved most effective, the reproductive vulnerabilities that made the species particularly susceptible, and the timeline from first human contact to complete population collapse. 97 years, Quinera observed, from first contact to extinction in less than a century. That's not the disturbing part, Vexhai interjected. The disturbing part is that they got more efficient over time. Look at the later entries. Species that took human centuries to eliminate in their early periods were being wiped out in decades by their industrial age. Dunn studied the data streams with the focus of someone trying to solve a puzzle that might have no solution. This level of documentation suggests either profound remorse or, she paused, unwilling to complete the thought, or profound satisfaction. Zilthak finished grimly. The research bay fell into uncomfortable silence as the implications settled around them like cosmic dust. Every civilization the hegemony had encountered showed some form of environmental impact, but none had turned extinction into a science. None had created comprehensive databases documenting their own destructive capabilities with the thoroughness of a military planning document. Director Vexhai said quietly, "There's something else. The database isn't historical. It's actively maintained. The last update was logged 3 days ago." Dunn's crest flattened completely. They're still doing this. According to their own records, species are disappearing at a rate of approximately 73 per day due to human activities, and they're documenting every single one. The weight of discovery settled over the research team like a burial shroud. They had come expecting to find another standard carbon-based civilization struggling with basic interplanetary logistics. Instead, they had uncovered something that challenged every assumption the hegemony held about the nature of intelligent life. Quinera broke the silence with a question none of them wanted to answer. What kind of species create a monument to its own destructive power? The Global Extinction Archive continued its silent testimony, growing larger with each passing moment, a digital ossuary that somehow managed to be both humanity's greatest shame and its most terrifying achievement. 3 hours into their investigation, the research team had moved past shock and settled into the kind of grim fascination that comes with staring into an abyss that stares back. Dr. Vexhai had isolated what he termed the strategic elimination subset of the database, and what they found made their earlier discoveries look like amateur hour. "These aren't accidents," announced technician Zilthak, their voice carrying a new edge of professional alarm. "Look at the subsection. Biological warfare applications. They used diseases as weapons against their own species, then documented how those same diseases affected native wildlife populations." Research specialist Quinera pulled up a parallel data stream. European colonization of the Americas, 1492 onwards. They introduced smallpox, measles, and typhus to indigenous human populations, then tracked how these pathogens decimated local fauna that had no immunity. 17 distinct mammalian species collapsed within 50 years of first pathogen introduction. "Collateral damage?" asked Research Director Dunn, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Negative." Vexhai's response came with supporting holographic evidence. Cross-referencing with their agricultural records shows they deliberately cleared out competing predator species to protect livestock. The disease introduction wasn't collateral. It was experimental. They were testing biological warfare efficiency on multiple target demographics simultaneously. The implications hung in the recycled air like toxic spores. The hegemony had encountered warlike species before, but none had treated extinction as a strategic tool with measurable outcomes and reproducible methodologies. Zilthak highlighted another section that made their exoskeleton crawl. Industrial whaling, 1800s through 1980s. They didn't hunt these massive oceanic mammals for survival. They had synthetic alternatives by the mid-20th century. They hunted them for economic optimization, documenting which species yielded the highest profit margins per hunting expedition. Profit margins, Quinera repeated flatly. They turned extinction into a business model. Multiple business models, Vexhai corrected, accessing deeper layers of the archive, ivory trade, fur trade, exotic pet trafficking, traditional medicine markets. Each entry includes cost-benefit analysis, supply chain logistics, and projected depletion timelines. They knew exactly when each species would go extinct and planned their operations accordingly. Mordun studied the data with the clinical detachment that had made her the hegemony's premier xenobiological analyst. This suggests calculation rather than instinct. Apex predators kill for territory or food. These humans appear to kill for abstract economic concepts. It's worse than that, Zilthak said, isolating what appeared to be humanity's crown jewel of deliberate destruction. Habitat modification for resource extraction. They didn't just hunt species to extinction. They eliminated entire ecosystems to access minerals, fossil fuels, and agricultural land. The Amazon rainforest alone, 8.7 million square kilometers, reduced by 37% in less than 5 decades. The holographic display showed deforestation patterns spreading across South America like a digital plague. Each cleared hectare representing countless species erased not through direct hunting, but through environmental obliteration. How many species lost per clear kilometer? Quinera asked, though she seemed to regret the question immediately. Vexhai consulted the archive. Conservative estimates place it at 43 species per square kilometer in high biodiversity zones. But here's what makes it truly disturbing. They developed mathematical models to predict extinction rates based on habitat reduction percentages. They knew exactly what they were destroying and quantified the loss before it happened. Predictive extinction modeling. Mordun mused, her crest rippling with what might have been admiration or horror. They turned ecological collapse into a science. The research team continued their digital archaeology, uncovering layer after layer of systematic environmental manipulation. Humans had drained wetlands with mechanical precision, acidified oceans through industrial chemistry, and altered global climate patterns through atmospheric engineering. Each intervention was documented with the thoroughness of a military campaign. Director, Quinera said, her voice tight with implications she didn't want to voice. We need to discuss the ramifications for first contact protocols. Mordun turned away from the data streams. Elaborate. Standard hegemony procedure assumes newly contacted species have limited environmental impact capabilities. We approach them as curiosities, not as... She gestured helplessly at the swirling data around them, as whatever this represents. Planetary scale elimination artists. Zilthak suggested grimly. The question, Vexhai interjected, is whether they represent an evolutionary aberration or an evolutionary inevitability. Are humans uniquely destructive? Or are they simply the first species we've encountered that achieved technological advancement through systematic elimination of competition? Mordun considered this while watching extinction data scroll past like a digital waterfall. Either possibility is troubling. If they're unique, they represent an unprecedented threat. If they're typical, then every species we classified as pre-contact might be a potential galaxy-wide extinction event waiting to achieve interstellar capabilities. The research bay's atmosphere processors hummed quietly as the team contemplated implications that stretched far beyond their original mission parameters. They had come to assess humanity's readiness for galactic integration. Instead, they had discovered a species that had turned the elimination of other life forms into an applied science. "There's one more thing," Vexhai said, his synthesized voice carrying reluctance. "The archive contains a subsection labeled Optimization Protocols. It appears to be their analysis of which extinction methods prove most efficient across different planetary ecosystems." Quinera's skin shifted to a pale blue that indicated deep unease. "They're not just documenting what they did, they're documenting what worked best. Knowledge preservation," More Dunn observed. "They're teaching future generations how to eliminate life more effectively." The Global Extinction Archive continued its relentless expansion, each new entry a testament to humanity's seemingly limitless capacity for turning extinction into expertise. And somewhere in the growing digital monument, the research team began to understand that they weren't studying a primitive civilization's environmental mistakes. They were examining the operational manual of the galaxy's most successful apex predators. By the sixth hour of analysis, Dr. Vexhai had developed what he could only describe as professional paranoia. The deeper they dug into humanity's records, the more disturbing patterns emerged, not just in what humans destroyed, but in how they improved their destructive capabilities over time. "Run the temporal analysis again," Research Director More Dunn commanded, her crest now permanently flattened in what her species considered a defensive posture. "I want to see the learning curve." Technician Zilfak manipulated the holographic timeline, and the research bay filled with humanity's evolutionary approach to extinction. Early period, roughly 50,000 years ago, megafauna elimination through persistence hunting, crude but effective. 47 large mammalian species eliminated over 15 millennia. Acceptable predatory behavior. Research specialist Quinera noted, well within normal sapient parameters. Then something changed. Zilfak continued, advancing the timeline. Agricultural revolution. 10,000 years ago, habitat conversion accelerates. But notice, they begin documenting which conversion methods yield the highest species elimination rates per unit of effort invested. Vexhai highlighted correlating data streams. Irrigation systems designed not just for crop production, but specifically to disrupt wetland ecosystems that supported competing food sources. They weren't just farming. They were conducting ecological warfare against anything that might threaten their resource monopoly. The timeline advanced further, and the pattern became undeniable. Each technological leap corresponded with increasingly sophisticated elimination techniques. The invention of metallurgy led to more efficient hunting weapons. The development of chemistry led to targeted pesticides. The mastery of genetics led to biological weapons that could eliminate entire taxonomic families. Industrial Revolution, circa 1750, More Dunn observed, studying the exponential curves with growing unease. Extinction rates increased by 3 orders of magnitude within a single century. But look at the precision, Quinera added, her voice tight with implications. They didn't just eliminate more species. They eliminated them more selectively. Coal mining targeted specific geological formations that supported endemic cave fauna. Railroad construction followed migration routes that maximized disruption to reproductive cycles. Zilfak accessed what appeared to be humanity's most chilling achievement: systematic elimination through technological integration. 20th century, mass production techniques applied to extinction protocols. Assembly line fishing vessels that could process entire marine ecosystems. Chemical factories that produce pesticides optimized for specific genetic markers. Urban development patterns designed to fragment habitats with mathematical precision. The research team watched in fascinated horror as humanity's timeline revealed itself as an extended masterclass in elimination efficiency. Each generation didn't just inherit the previous generation's destructive capabilities. They refined them, optimized them, and documented the improvements for future implementation. Director Vexhai said, his voice carrying the weight of realization, we need to address the communications implications. Standard first contact protocols assume species achieve interstellar capability through cooperative technological development, but humans appear to have achieved advanced technology through competitive elimination of everything else on their planet. Mordun turned away from the data streams to face her team, explain the strategic ramifications. Every species we've contacted developed space travel to explore, trade, or expand peacefully. Humans developed space travel after eliminating most of the biodiversity on their home world. Their entire technological progression is based on elimination optimization. Quinera pulled up comparative analysis charts that made the research bay's atmosphere feel several degrees colder. Cross-referencing with hegemony records of 47 contacted civilizations, average pre-contact extinction rate across all species, 0.3 species per century, human pre-contact extinction rate, 73 species per day, accelerating. They're not just outliers, Mordun realized. They're operating on completely different evolutionary principles. The most disturbing discovery came when Zilthak isolated humanity's approach to technological research and development. Each major technological breakthrough was immediately tested for elimination applications. Nuclear fission, first weapons, then power generation. Genetic engineering, first biological weapons, then medical applications. Artificial intelligence, first military targeting systems, then civilian assistance. They weaponize every advancement, Vexhai observed. It's not that they're inherently violent. It's that they instinctively optimize every tool for competitive advantage through elimination. The research team stared at the holographic evidence surrounding them, finally understanding that they weren't dealing with a species that had stumbled into destructive capabilities. They were analyzing a species that had deliberately cultivated extinction as their primary evolutionary strategy. Emergency protocols, Mordun announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had just recognized an existential threat. We need to contact the Hegemony Council immediately. What do we tell them? Quinera asked. That we found a species that has turned elimination into an applied science, and they're approximately 50 years away from achieving faster-than-light travel. Zilthak looked up from their workstation, mandibles clicking in what might have been nervous laughter. Director, there's one more thing. The archive contains a section labeled Interplanetary Expansion Protocols. It appears to be their preliminary analysis of how their elimination techniques might be adapted for non-terrestrial environments. The research bay fell silent, except for the relentless hum of life support systems and the soft chiming of new archive entries being logged in real time. Somewhere on the blue planet below, humanity continued its systematic documentation of destruction, unknowingly preparing for the day when they would carry their expertise beyond their own world. And in the cold vacuum of space, for alien researchers finally understood that they had discovered something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that evolved not through cooperation or adaptation, but through perfection of elimination itself. Dr. Vexhai discovered the second database entirely by accident, while preparing emergency transmission protocols to alert the Hegemony Council. His deep scan sensors detected another massive data structure running parallel to the Global Extinction Archive. This one carried a different signature, older, larger, and somehow more complex. Director Mordun, he called. Confusion replacing professional alarm that had dominated his voice for the past 8 hours. There's another archive. Same organizational structure, same update frequency, but... He paused, his tentacles dancing uncertainly across his interface. The data classification is completely different. Research director Mordaunt approached his workstation with the wariness of someone who had already had their worldview shattered twice in one day. Different how? It's labeled the Global Conservation Archive, and it's 3 times larger than the Extinction database. Technician Zilthak's mandibles stopped clicking entirely. Conservation of what? Vex-High's holographic display materialized between them, and suddenly the research bay was filled with something none of them had expected: hope. Entry after entry scrolled past, but instead of documenting destruction, these files recorded preservation, restoration, and resurrection. California Condor, Vex-High read, his synthesized voice carrying disbelief. Population reduced to 27 individuals in 1987. Captive breeding program initiated. Current population, 537 individuals across 6 breeding facilities and wild release sites. Research specialist Quinera leaned closer to the display. They brought a species back from the edge of extinction? Not just back from the edge. Zilthak corrected, accessing deeper data layers. They brought dozens back from complete extinction. This entry, Przewalski's horse, extinct in the wild 1966. Reintroduced through genetic conservation programs. Current wild population, 412 individuals. Mordaunt studied the conservation timeline with the same intensity she had applied to the extinction data. When did this preservation effort begin? That's the remarkable part, Vex-High replied, highlighting temporal correlation data. The Conservation Archive begins approximately 150 years ago, right when their extinction rates were reaching peak efficiency. They were simultaneously perfecting elimination techniques and developing preservation protocols. The research team found themselves staring at humanity's most profound contradiction, a species that had weaponized extinction while simultaneously becoming the galaxy's most sophisticated conservationists. Look at this, Quinera said, isolating a subsection that made her skin shift to colors her species used to express awe. Seed banks, genetic repositories, cryogenic preservation facilities. They've collected and stored genetic material from 1.7 million species, including most of the ones they eliminated. They're not just preserving existing species, Zilthak observed, accessing what appeared to be humanity's most ambitious project. They're actively resurrecting extinct ones. The extinction protocols using preserved DNA, surrogate species breeding programs, habitat reconstruction initiatives. They eliminated the woolly mammoth 4,000 years ago, and they're currently attempting to bring it back. Vex-High pulled up comparative analysis that defied every assumption the hegemony held about technological development patterns, cross-referencing both archives. For every extinction technique they developed, they simultaneously developed corresponding preservation techniques, chemical weapons and water purification systems, habitat destruction and ecosystem restoration, genetic warfare and genetic therapy. They learned to create and uncreate life with equal precision. Mordaunt said quietly. The Conservation Archive revealed humanity's other face. The same species that had turned extinction into science had also turned preservation into art. National parks designed with mathematical precision to maximize biodiversity protection. International treaties that regulated resource extraction across planetary boundaries. Global monitoring systems that tracked every endangered species in real time. Director, Quinera said, her voice carrying wonder instead of horror for the first time in hours. They're not just documenting conservation efforts. They're documenting conservation philosophy, ethics frameworks for deciding which species deserve preservation priority, moral arguments about humanity's responsibility to undo the damage they caused. Zilthak highlighted the most remarkable discovery yet, restoration timelines. They've calculated exactly how long it would take to restore their planet's biodiversity to pre-human levels. Current estimate, 47,000 years using existing technology, 3,000 years using projected technological capabilities. They're planning to fix everything they broke, Vexhai observed. More than that, more done corrected. Studying the data with growing comprehension, they're the first species we've encountered that became conscious of their own destructive power and chose to weaponize preservation instead. The research bay fell into contemplative silence as the team absorbed this final revelation. Humanity hadn't just mastered extinction, they had transcended it. They had become the galaxy's first species to achieve complete mastery over life and death itself, then chose to use that mastery for creation rather than destruction. What do we tell the Hegemony Council? Quinera asked. Mordun considered the question while watching conservation data stream pass like digital poetry. We tell them we found a species that represents the evolutionary endpoint of consciousness. They've mastered both creation and destruction so completely that they've moved beyond survival competition into deliberate stewardship. And the first contact implications? Zilthak pressed. We tell them, Mordun said, her crest rising in what her species considered an expression of profound respect, that we found the galaxy's first gardeners, a species that learned 10 entire worlds instead of just consuming them. Dr. Vexhai powered down his workstation, but the Global Conservation Archive continued its quiet expansion, growing larger with each passing moment. Somewhere on the blue planet below, humanity continued its dual documentation of destruction and creation, building digital monuments to both their greatest failures and their greatest hopes. And in the cold vacuum of space, for alien researchers finally understood that they had discovered something far more remarkable than a species that had perfected extinction. They had found a species that had perfected extinction, then chose to perfect resurrection instead, and in doing so, had become something unprecedented in galactic history, the universe's first truly mature civilization.